I'm back. It's the Music Stupid number 24. Now, as a reminder, it's a reminder for me that it's about the music, stupid. So I'm really kind of saying stupid to myself, like, hey, talk about the music, talk about that. I mean, it's always good to talk about a great sounding record, and I have no problem with that. You want a good sounding record, but you want great music in that good sounding record. I mean, it's kind of useless to me having a great sounding record when you don't give a crap about the music, right? So when I do these videos, I share 5 albums that I've thought about lately and I've been playing lately from my collection, and I want to share them with you. Uh, there are always records that someone may not know, but obviously a lot of you may know some of these. But I try to go with a somewhat of a variety each time. And I want to open up with it's a song cycle, a soundtrack in a way of songs for the 1973 motion picture by Lindsay Anderson called "Oh Lucky Man." This is a soundtrack, a selection of songs by Alan Price. Now, I love this movie. This is a wacky, out there. It's a like almost a 3 hour movie. I think 2.5 hours or something. I remember seeing it in the theater, and I went literally 2 days later and saw it with another friend because it just blew me away. It stars Malcolm McDowell, and Malcolm McDowell's debut was in a film also by Lindsay Anderson, the British director, called If, about British public schools, which are private schools in Britain, boarding schools, and that is a film of its time. I highly recommend it, If, and of course, because of that film, Malcolm McDowell was selected by Stanley Kubrick to be in Clockwork Orange, and then in Oh Lucky Man, about basically a coffee salesman on the road, and what a road trip this is. You could compare it to The Wizard of Oz. It's really out there. But anyway, let's get back to the record. The record is by Alan Price. Alan Price was an original member of this band, The Animals. There he is, right there on the right. He's that fantastic organist, piano player, and organ player on the song. Their big breakout hit was a cover of House of the Rising Sun. And that organ part of that is just spectacular. And he actually, after a while, didn't like the direction. He didn't feel he was fitting in, or direction the Animals were going in. He was in the band from 62, 63 to 65. Then he left and went on his own, and the Animals became Eric Burton and the Animals. Alan Price also had a somewhat of a hit in the UK more than in America of "I Put a Spell on You," the Screaming Jay Hawkins song. And he was one of two early pioneers of the songs of Randy Newman, and he covered, like Harry Nilsson, covered a bunch of Randy Newman songs on solo project. He actually sort of plays himself within the structure of the film. There is this touring band that's driving through the back roads, driving through England in their van, and they pick up our lead protagonist, Malcolm McDowell, in here. And there's scenes of them rehearsing and playing, and a lot of the songs are them performing within the structure of the film. And it's really interesting. This is a mix of pop, very catchy, very Randy Newman-like in essence, of that type of music, that kind of singer-songwriting. There's a wonderful song called "Changes," which is a very gospel-like song performance on here. But I love this record. There was talk before "Oh Lucky Man" was made of Lindsay Anderson sort of doing a documentary of a road trip of Alan Price and his touring band, and that kind of fell apart budget-wise and a lot of reasons. And so Lindsay Anderson wrote him in the script. And I adore this record. When I was in college radio, 73, when this was out, in 74, I was playing this on some of my shows. But it's very commercial, very poppy, and very intimate. It's not overproduced. I just love this record. "Oh Lucky Man," the opening track, the title track, is sublime, I think. So that's my first offering of the day in It's the Music Stupid. Now I want to talk about one of the best breakup records ever made. I mean, breakup records are can be wonderful. They can be plodding along if, the man or woman just it seems like the men write about it more than the women, right? The women seem to move on in some cases. There's exceptions, obviously. But this is one that includes both artists, and they were breaking up while we were recording this album. And to me, I would say this is the masterpiece of the two, and they both have done some amazing records. This is Shoot Out the Lights by Richard and Linda Thompson. Richard Thompson, of course, was one of the founding members of Fairport Convention, and several of the members of the original Fairport Convention play on this album, including Simon Nicol, Dave Pegg, and Dave Maddox on drums. This is a wonderful record. This is produced by Joe Boyd. They started working on this record when they were touring with Jerry Rafferty, Baker Street Jerry Rafferty, and Jerry Rafferty was going to produce, and Steelers Wheels, was going to produce them, and I think it didn't fit. And then Joe Boyd, who had worked with, Joe Boyd, in a way, he's an expatriate American who really is the key of all this kind of the UK British folk wave, folk rock wave that happened in the late 60s into the 70s. Everything from incredible string band. Steel Ice Band did he work with? I'm thinking he did or did not. I forgot. Obviously, Fairport Convention, Nick Drake, so many others. And he produced this album wonderfully. It's so disjointed in a relationship, they couldn't even be in the same place to get a cover photograph. So you have a photograph of Linda on the wall in this sort of dilapidated apartment room there, and there's the great guitar player and vocalist, and what a sweet, wonderful, and what a bold voice Linda Thompson has. Don't Renege on Our Love, Walking on a Wire, a great song, Man in Need, Just Emotion. Now, Shoot at the Lights is a great song, and there's a wonderful song Linda sings called Did She Jump or Was She Pushed? I love that. I did see him on this tour at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. It's become sort of an infamous tour because the tension, you could cut it with a knife. You could feel the tension on stage. And so there we go. Shoot Out the Lights, Richard and Linda Thompson. A wonderful record. The early 80s obviously were a time of post-punk, especially in the UK, and it kind of dribbled over into the States, but the UK was really the central of it. And obviously one of my favorite bands was Gang of Four, and very much like Gang of Four, or at least compared to them occasionally, are the Au Pairs, and this is their debut album. They only made 2 albums. They have a woman-led group in Leslie Woods, who was sort of the main singer of the group, and they had a really kind of that, they got into funky soul in a bit, and their second album actually got a little more soulful, a little more funky. But this is an amazing record. This is a politically charged, a sexually politically charged album called Playing with a Different Sex. It talks about the situations of the sexual revolution in terms of the politics of it. There's a song on here about the treatment of women in Ireland around that time in the 70s into the 80s. So what an amazing record. They do a cover of a Bowie song, Repetition, here from Lodger. This is a upbeat record, but it's an intense record in terms of the lyrical content. And this is my original UK copy. You want to see what it looks like? People like to see this wonderful pink record. It's on the Human label, Human Records, the Au Pairs. If you like Gang of Four, if you like Entertainment by Gang of Four, they're 2 records. In essence, these bands burned really bright. They were going to do a 3rd record, and then they ended up splitting up. I think they were going to work with Steve Lillywhite by that time. But this is a really good post-punk, upbeat, a lot of bass, a lot of guitar, very rhythmic, and a bit funky. But again, their second album is, let me just grab it because you want to see that. Second album, this one here, is a little more funky, a lot more funky actually, but this is Senses and Sensuality, so you can tell the direction that Leslie Woods is going with this band here. But either of these records, but this is the one. This is the one. I mean, look at that cover. You can just tell that's going to be a politically charged, mainly on sexual politics, pairs out of the UK, out of Birmingham, I believe. In 1966, a San Francisco band had a big top 40 hit called Hello, Hello, and that was a Sopwith Camel, and obviously named after the Sopwith Camel, the famous airplane in World War One. They were an East Bay band, and they almost didn't fit in with the rest of the San Francisco scene. They were very vaudevillian in a way, a little Lovin' Spoonful in terms of folk rock, but they did this kind of show tune, vaudevillian, poppy stuff. I mean, Hello, Hello. Can I have some of your tangerine? Hello, hello. I like your smile. Big hit 1966, and then nothing after that. Bright orange cover on that album on Kama Sutra Records. It was produced by Eric Jacobson, who produced all the, or most, I think all maybe, of the Lemon Spoonful albums. In the 80s, he would go on to produce the first, 5 albums by Chris Isaak. Great sound, great producer. Very kind of organic. He had sort of that folky, there's a folky essence to his production, or at least the bands he was attracted to. You know, obviously the Lemon Spoonful have a little bit of jug band music thing, and I think Sopwith Camel had a little of that. Cut to 1973, and they put this album out. This is the Miraculous Hump Returns from the Moon. This is a wonderful cult album. I just noticed, the reason I thought about pulling this again, this is my original copy, and this was on Warner Brothers Records, I believe, Reprise Records. And there's the band in 1973. Original members, all the original members, I believe, from the East Bay, and it is this album. I love this record. Now, I just noticed that this is getting a reissue. I don't know who's reissuing it, and it's a really interesting mix. It's got the show tune thing going on a little bit. It's got some prog rock elements. So if you're into prog, maybe lighter prog, it's got some jazz. It's got some Indian classical music mixed in, sort of post, you know, I don't want to say psychedelic because it's not really that. It's definitely a record of 1973, but it almost didn't fit in with what was happening in 1973, and it definitely got lost in the shuffle. But I love this record. It's again on Reprise Records, obviously the famous orange label Reprise, which you've seen millions of times everywhere in your own collection, I assume. But highly recommended. If you like that description, yeah, it's a mix. I think the problem at the time with it's a hard sell. It's hard to define. There's a song on here called "Coke, Suede, and Waterbeds," which is a very, again, a show tune, showbiz type song that some people can't stand. Again, I think I started thinking about this when I was thinking also about the Alan Price, "A Lucky Man." Not that it sounds like that, but some of the songwriting has that poppy sort of creativity, that song kind of songwriting that's very catchy. I mean, Randy Newman does it too in a point, but some of the songs here obviously are elongated. That's where the prog thing comes in. Some interesting jams on here. So Sopwith Camel, the Miraculous Hump Returns from the Moon. Lastly, Songs for Drella. This record came out in 1990, and Songs for Drella. Drella is one of the nicknames sort of referred to as to Andy Warhol as half Dracula, half Cinderella, which actually, when you think about it, if you've ever read his diaries or know his career, that actually makes sense. This is my original promo copy. If you can kind of see, if you get the light right, I know you hate that light, I hate that too, but you can kind of see the face of Andy Warhol between John Cale and Lou Reed. Of course, John Cale and Lou Reed are very important in the Andy Warhol story because of their band Velvet Underground. They weren't obviously doing anything musically at all. Lou Reed had finished and toured with the album New York, and they re-met again at the memorial for Andy Warhol, who died was he died in 87, I believe. They decided to put this together. It was actually a suggestion of the artist Julian Schnabel, also another contemporary of Andy Warhol, and these two here, and suggested they do some kind of tribute, and this is the result. And this is an amazing song cycle of songs put together, telling chronologically the story of Andy Warhol. There's a lot of great stuff on this record. I just adore this record. It's a long record. I believe the Record Store Day, is it a Record Store or the reissue? I think breaks it up into 2 LPs. I can't remember now. That's my thinking, because it's a long record for a single record, but it still sounds great. It's on Sire Records. It's beautiful, and it's a beautiful sort of docu art piece on Andy Warhol and the life of Andy Warhol. And soon after this album came out, they did a live performance at the Berklee School of Music, BAM, in Brooklyn, and I've seen parts of that documentary. I think that performance, as I recall, was also directed by Julian Schnabel. I might be I think that's correct. Anyway, fantastic album on Sire Records, Songs for Drella, 1990. Just love it. Look, growing up in a small town, when you're growing up in a small town, there's just so much variety, and they really almost kind of answer each other, go back and forth with the way they wrote the songs, and then they join in occasionally together. There's some spoken word bits, and some literally some of the writings from the Andy Warhol diaries occasionally on a couple of tracks, as I recall too. But I love this record. So that's It's the Music Stupid, number 24. Thanks again. There's going to be way more. Some new releases, some things that have come in. But thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you. See you next time.